Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. And if you've been watching the price of silver today, you know that it has taken a dive. We're down at the moment about $1 on the spot price, down to a price level of about $21.50. And the reason for that is the US dollar index has strengthened and it has driven the price of the metal down. Now, if you've been stacking for a while and you've been paying attention to the price of silver, you know that it's a volatile market. Price movements in silver tend to be significantly more volatile than, say, in gold or other commodities. It's a relatively thinly traded and small market. Not to say it's a tiny market by any means, but compared to something like gold, it is. And that means that the price can move a lot in one day. Now, does this mean that you should run out and sell all your silver and panic and get out of this stuff because it could be going down to zero? Well, I don't think so. I mean, I'm not going to sell any of my silver. In fact, I've never sold a single ounce of physical silver because that's not what this stuff is. You don't buy this stuff to flip it. At least I don't. That's not my rationale for buying silver. If I want to flip something, I'll buy some paper silver like an ETF or a mining stock. But if I am buying physical silver, it's a long-term holding. I don't really have any plans to sell this in the near future. You know, in the worst case scenario, I guess this stuff would be like a barter good for SHTF, or it would transfer your wealth over to another monetary paradigm after the death of the dollar. Or in the best case scenario, inflation just kind of continues to march along and this stuff will hold your purchasing power over the long term. But it's not the sort of thing you want to be buying and flipping. And also, none of this is financial advice, of course, but I would strongly advise you, if you bought some physical silver at some point in the past couple months and now you're seeing the price drop, you don't want to just sell it because of a move down. Really what you want to do is average down on your physical silver investment. I mean, that's what I do. I buy small quantities of silver on a regular basis. I don't ever go all in on a purchase. I always try to have some powder dry to take advantage of drops like this, and you just slowly build your stack. And it's like a silver savings account. In fact, I would say that this stuff is even a better savings account than fiat because it's a little bit harder to spend. There's a little bit more of a barrier between you and spending your money. It's not just as simple as swiping a screen on an app. You actually have to go sell this stuff. So it's a great way to save money, and it's a great way to save for the long term. Now, the price of silver might have dropped by $1 today, but you got to remember the paradigm that we're operating in here. I mean, nothing about the fundamental aspects of our economy have changed. People are anticipating the Fed taper that Jerome Powell mentioned at the FOMC meeting last week. So that's responsible for the rise in the dollar index. But I think that that's probably going to be a short-lived phenomenon. What people probably don't realize is that the Fed taper isn't going to happen, or if it does, it's not going to happen the way Jerome Powell described it. I mean, he said the Fed taper would be done by the middle of next year. I really have a hard time believing that the Fed is going to be able to end $120 billion of monthly asset purchases in that short a period of time. But, you know, time will tell. We'll see. Maybe the dollar will continue to strengthen and the Fed will taper and they will raise interest rates. But if that's the case, silver's just going to go on sale even cheaper, and I'll continue stacking because you can't really have it both ways. You can't taper your asset purchases if you're the Fed and raise interest rates unless the government gets spending under control. Because don't forget, we have over $28 trillion in debt. And if the interest rates go up, if the Fed is successful with its, liftoff and its tapering, then that debt is going to become rapidly unserviceable. So unless you start seeing government spending getting under control, if you start seeing the debt shrink, that would be a time to be concerned about your silver holdings. But just because the Federal Reserve Chairman talks about tapering without an exact timeline, and he just kind of indicates that that's where something's going to go, with a bunch of conditional language, mind you. I mean, if you watch that press conference, you'll see that Jerome Powell gave himself plenty of wiggle room to, forestall the taper or not do it with the way he discussed it. But nothing with the fundamental situation for silver has really changed. I mean, we still have tons of debt. The Fed is still buying $120 billion of assets every month. They haven't stopped doing that yet, so that's still what's happening. And the taper, I'll kind of believe it when I see it. But silver, I think, at $21.50 an ounce is just an absolute steal. Of course, you can't really find this stuff, physical metal, for $21.50 an ounce. That's just a paper price. It's the spot price. And the spot price is derived from paper futures contracts that are traded on the COMEX. And that's the weird thing about silver. For the price drop that we saw today, a big move down, you would think people would have to be selling silver, right? But the fact is that with the way that the silver market is structured right now, with physical metal, this stuff, getting its price supposedly from paper contracts, it's like a derivative of physical silver is giving physical silver its price. It doesn't make any sense. But with that kind of a system, you don't even need to sell 1 ounce of physical metal to crash the price like you saw today. All that you need is a bunch of fiat currency, and then you use that fiat currency to go into the futures market and you short paper silver, and all of a sudden it's like people are selling a bunch of silver. But they're not really, they're just selling paper. So I expect that that is really what is behind the drop today. It's traders, it's weak hands. I don't think there's too many people selling their physical bullion on a drop like today. I mean, I hope not. If you're a stacker and you're watching this and you're getting ready to box your stuff up and send it off to a metals dealer, you're going to take it down to your coin shop, I would think seriously about reconsidering that. Again, not financial advice, but I wouldn't want to be selling bullion on a day like today. In fact, I wouldn't want to be selling bullion for fiat currency, period, because like I said, we've got $28 trillion in debt and growing. The Fed is continuing to create $120 billion and purchase assets with it on the open market every month. Still, right now, there is no taper in effect. Interest rates are still at extremely low levels. I mean, the whole financial system is basically rotten to the core. So I feel very comfortable holding precious metals. If I can free up some powder, I might go ahead and buy some more, because I do like to average down and buy the dips on physical metal. But I'm going to have to shell out a lot more than $21.50 for an ounce of metal, because one of the consequences of having this sort of manipulated precious metals market, and it is manipulated, guys. I mean, don't be under any illusions that we have an honest price finding mechanism in the precious metals. JP Morgan, who happens to be the custodian of the SLV silver ETF, by the way, has been fined multiple times over the past decade for manipulating the silver price and the precious metals price. So they definitely intervene in and manipulate markets. That is a fact. Now, whether any individual drop like today's is the result of, say, manipulation or just regular market forces, that's kind of more speculation. It's hard to tell in an individual trading day what's going on, whether the price action is the result of some kind of manipulation or just people really selling paper contracts of silver for legitimate purposes. But regardless, we do have this manipulated precious metals market, and one of the consequences of that is we see a price disconnect between physical precious metals and their paper counterparts, specifically in silver. I mean, the premiums in silver are super high, even compared to, say, the premiums in gold. And that's because I think the silver market, being smaller, is easier to manipulate, and so we probably do see more manipulation in silver. But right now, if you go to buy a 1 ounce round, I mean, you're going to be paying a $4 to $5 premium for most dealers. And if you want to get something like an American Silver Eagle, the markup over spot price is going to be 20 to 30%. Now, if you've been stacking for a while, I mean, I've been stacking for about a decade, and historically, the premiums that we see today are quite high over the spot price. Now, I know that during the silver squeeze back in February, premiums got really high, and that just shows you what an influx of buyers into the physical market can do. I mean, it can cause a complete disconnect between the physical price of the metal and the spot price. But despite the fact that premiums have come down a little bit from those days, they're still very high historically. And, you know, speaking of the silver squeeze back in February, silver interest then was drastically higher than it is today. I did a video a couple days ago where I mentioned that interest among the public and among investors right now in silver is almost near a record low. It's the lowest we've seen since 2018. So to me, that means that now is actually a great time to stack. And today's price drop just makes it an even better time to add to your physical metal holdings. Because remember, you don't get rich by buying things after they go up. You want to buy things when people are fearful, and, you know, when there's blood in the streets, so to speak, when there's a big drop like today. That's when you've got to have the fortitude to go out and stick to your convictions and recognize that the fundamental situation in precious metals has not changed. Silver is still an incredibly useful industrial material. We are going to need it moving forward even more for things like solar energy, medical use, tons of industrial stuff, all these advanced electronics, electric cars. Silver is super useful for all of those things, and there's a steady, constant demand for it. The annual mine production can barely keep up with the annual consumption. It's not like gold, where every ounce of gold that's ever been mined is still above ground and in some form, jewelry or coins or what have you. Silver gets used up. Silver gets used up. It's put into bandages, it's put into water filters, it's put into vehicles, and then it winds up in the landfill, and it's basically gone forever, at least at these spot prices. I guess you could go dig up landfills and recycle the silver out of it, but to make that economically feasible, the price of silver would have to be way, way higher than it is. So for all intents and purposes, that silver is lost. These low prices that we're seeing in silver and this manipulated silver market, well, I just don't think it's sustainable. And you know what they say, the things that aren't sustainable won't be sustained, and I really think that's the case. Now, how long can silver prices remain at the low levels that they're at? Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't predict the future with any degree of certainty, but the fundamental situation has not changed. There's still tons of debt. There's still debt monetization going on by the Federal Reserve, regardless of what they may, talk about tapering and liftoff. I'll believe it when I see it. Silver is still an incredibly useful metal that is consumed. It's used in more applications than almost any other commodity, with the exception of petroleum. So this stuff, you gotta have it. And also, there's a growing disconnect between physical silver and the paper markets. And I think that what we're seeing now is just the beginning, and I expect that more people are going to wake up to the economic realities that we're living in today and all of the things that are going on in the world. They're going to want certainty, they're going to want hard money, and when investors move in mass into the silver market, it's going to make the silver squeeze from February look like child's play. I mean, this stuff is potentially just going to become unobtainable for a while. And when will we see that time? Well, I don't know. Again, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think the writing is on the wall, and it could be a decade from now, it could be 6 months from now, who knows? I mean, I think that the last year or two has proven that things can change very rapidly, and that things that people find impossible today can become reality tomorrow. So it's not outside of the realm of possibilities that silver could move up drastically at any given point, and I think that the fundamentals are there. I mean, almost every other asset that you can invest in has moved up dramatically over the past 10 years. Look at real estate, look at stocks, especially growth and tech stocks. Gosh, they're almost in a huge overvalued bubble situation right now. Look at cryptocurrency. I mean, Bitcoin's up almost 5,000 times since 2011. So silver is at half the price it was in 2011. So what's the better deal? You want to buy things when they're cheap. You want to get value with your investments. And that's what I'm trying to do by stacking up physical precious metals. And, speaking of the vast, mass of public investors moving into an asset, it's when you see some kind of a panic that you see something like silver, which is a really small market, especially if you're just considering the physical bullion. This is a tiny market, silver trading. The paper market is big, sort of. I mean, relative to gold, again, it's not. Relative to other paper assets, it's not. But when you just look at physical investment grade retail bullion, there's not very much of it to go around. And if some folks on Wall Street Bets and Wall Street Silver on Reddit can create a squeeze like we saw in February, imagine when CNBC is covering silver and saying, hey, you got to get into this stuff because there's crazy rampant inflation, the dollar's being destroyed. And I mean, that day could be coming. That could be soon. Maybe not, but it's definitely a possibility. It's when you see that kind of move that the price of silver will explode. And, today I was at the grocery store, just to give you a little anecdote about public and inflation and what people are aware of. I was at the grocery store, and of course, I mean, as far as inflation goes, if you've been shopping for groceries lately, you definitely know that inflation is real. It costs, it seems like more and more every single visit I go, the prices are moving up, and you wonder where the money's going when you get checked out. But I was walking around and I was in the dairy aisle and I saw these two guys. They were, they're at the supermarket and they're stocking shelves. They were working and they were just chatting amongst themselves, and I'm looking for stuff, but I can kind of hear their conversation, and I hear them start talking about inflation. And I think, oh gosh, I was kind of a hurry, so I didn't really get involved in the conversation, but I did eavesdrop just a little bit to see what these guys were talking about. And they were discussing how much some of the items on the shelves had moved up. And these guys are stocking the shelves, so they're looking at the prices every day, and they were discussing how they've noticed that prices on individual items are moving up a lot. And this just goes to show that the general public is becoming aware of what's going on with money and what's going on with inflation and the money supply. Now, I still think that there's a lot of people out there who have no clue about what's going on. I mean, if you go up to the average person on the street and you ask them the difference between, say, fiat currency and commodity-backed hard money, you're going to get a glazed look. And, you know, that's because now is still a good time to be buying silver, because people haven't broadly become aware of what's going on with the dollar and our economic situation. But when you start hearing people discussing things like inflation in an everyday workplace conversation, I think that that's an indicator that people are starting to wake up. And the high premiums that we see on physical metal are also an indication that people are starting to wake up, because, you know, your average person who's just out at the grocery store and they're paying their bills, you know, buying gas, buying food, and that makes up a significant portion of their household budget. If they start getting worried about protecting the purchasing power of their wealth, this is what they're going to buy. They're not going to be buying futures contracts. And that's why I think you see the disconnect between physical bullion and the paper spot price. So anyway, guys, this is kind of a long video. I'm just sort of rambling at this point. I wouldn't be too worried about the drop in the price of metal. If you have some cash, probably a good time to add some of this stuff to your stack, to acquire some more, take advantage of these sales. Because the thing is that once these sales are over and once the price of silver really takes off and people become aware of what's going on with fiat currency and the dollar, you're not going to be able to get metals for the prices that you can today. And even though the premiums are a little high, that's just the real price of the physical precious metals. It doesn't deter me from stacking at all. You know, just get the cheapest silver you can find. I'm not saying go out and pay 30% or 40% over spot for an American Silver Eagle, but if you have to pay a few bucks over spot, it's not the end of the world. I'd still prefer to trade fiat for hard money any day, even if there's a premium involved. So let me know what you guys think. Are you still stacking, or are you panicking and going out and selling all your silver? I think that I probably know what the answer to that question is, but let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. And also, if you guys liked this video and you want to see more videos about stacking and silver and inflation and investing, there will be some videos on your screen right now that you can click on, so check those out, and I will catch you guys next time. Thank you all very much for watching. Keep stacking. Smart Silver Stacker out.